cloud, and I need to share the screen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to email live 30+ training, all the way from my holiday destination in Grenada. And the rum is fantastic. So, here is my free training schedule. I've already delivered attacks on 19th of June, networking on the 26th of June. And this time, we're going to do encryption. So we're going to look at symmetric and asymmetric encryption. Then we're going to have a break. Then we're going to have July for disaster recovery and authentication. Where's the training held? It's held on Zoom, and there is the meeting ID and the passcode. Next week, I'm going to change the time to be 1500 EST and 2000 summertime. Who is Ian Neil? Well, I've taught Security Plus 40 weeks a year for the past 5 years on the US Army AITP program. Now, I did a 10-day boot camp with a high pass rate. So what is Security Plus training? First of all, this is my website, and it's got some really good free training resources. So let us go into here and go Security Plus training. Here we go. And up comes my website, and you can see here it looks quite nice. And a couple of tabs on the very front page about the study guide, acronym flashcards, the free live training. Let's go there and see what's actually in free live training. And you can see here the previous sessions we've got are actually in here. There's a video on network, one on attack. So if you've missed it or you want to reread it, it's fine. A fantastic idea of mine was to give away a free voucher every month, so you can go into there and you can get the free voucher. I've got free exam resources, and I'll just briefly go over them. Exam tips, preparation. What should I do when I'm preparing for the exam? First thing, here's the syllabus, and you can see the exam domains. And what we should be doing is do this path of study. Get yourself a certification guide, a study timetable, step-by-step confirmation, and do some practical exercises, watch some other videos. You don't watch videos on some of the aspects. If you're not sure of maybe single sign-on authentication, go to get it in and watch someone set it up. Exam preparation, performance-based questions are good. I've got some on my website. And as I go through recommended resources, one of the resources I recommend are things like YouTube videos, and also Professor Messer, because Professor Messer does a fantastic free course on Security Plus, although his material doesn't get you quite where you want to be. Now, on my study guide, you've got a thing called glossary. And what happens is people struggle with acronyms. If I've got ACL, what is this? It's access control. A list of those allowed or denied access to the relevant permission. So if you struggle with acronyms, you can inside there. I've also got flashcards. I've got plenty of flashcards. I've also got ports. So let's do this one here. Let's go to the next one. The type of attack is an application attack in which directed IP broadcast is sent to the border router, and the victim gets replies, and it's a Smurf attack. And what we've got acronym flashcards themselves. Know what is FreeDes, and FreeDes is basically triple des encryption algorithm. You go to the next one, AAA, authorization, authentication and accounting. Then I've got some performance-based questions. If you look at the performance-based questions, we're going to do maybe attacks. And there's 16 or 17 answers. This, you go through, oh, banner grabbing, I think it's redirect to fake website. Oh dear, I've got that one wrong. You know what I mean? What is, let's have a look. Let's go down and have a little look. And we'll say to ourselves, what is shadow IP? What we're looking for here, we're looking for somebody that's not allowed to go to the website and navigate this. What's the common password? That'll be password trained. So I get password trained, I've got it correct. The idea is to get these right. And if you go further down, I've got practical exercises on labs. Now, what can you do on the labs? Here's one here for DNS. All the labs are designed on a Windows 10 PC. Now, there's the one here. Confirm your DNS settings. Right-click the Start button, run in, CNDN, ipconfig/all, and it gives you step-by-step guides on what you should see as you're actually. And then you've got some mock exams. I don't want to spend too much time on the website, but that's just to give you an idea. And if you go to the home, if you're taking Security Plus, please enter the free exam voucher draw. It doesn't matter whose book you're using, or it doesn't matter who you're following. This is just for MD that wants to give a chance. What I've done, I've written a book that's reasonably, it's a very cheap book actually. And I've done this exam to help young people and people get a chance to get a job in IT. And use the resources. Let's get back onto my PowerPoint. So I've got free exam advice. That's my book, like it's a certification bite rather than study. I use the same jargon as the exam. Some geeks don't like it because it's weird. Some people say questions in your book don't relate to the question in the exam. Well, two things. When you take the exam, stuff outside the syllabus that's not marked, it's in there. And if I provide the same questions for the exam, that's known as a brain dump and it's illegal, so we can't give it. But we can give my book the concept. So let's look at today's session. This is an extract from my book on Chapter 2, Implementing Public Key Infrastructure. Now, quite a lot of this, I'm going to actually chop and talk and see how we're doing. Symmetric encryption. What is symmetric encryption? It's encryption where you've only got one key. You've got a private key. It's also known as a shared key. It's also known as a session key. One can use a thing called non-repudiation. That says, I cannot prove it was not me. Now, symmetric encryption will all have the same key, so you can't do non-repudiation with it. Now, the second one you've got is asymmetric encryption. And asymmetric encryption has two keys, and this is more widely used. The private key you will retain, and the public key you will give it away. So let us come out of here. Let me unshare my screen. What I'll do is I'll go into my whiteboard and I'll put chalk and talk these two different types of encryption. So first of all, Let's look at symmetric. And symmetric encryption of one key. But you need to know the algorithm. And the first one is DES. Then we've got 3DES. Then we've got AES. And these are common. You've also got RC4. You've got blowfish. And you've also got twofish. But for purpose of the exam, let us focus on DES, triple DES, and AES. Now, what is DES? It's a 56-bit key. What is triple DES? It's 3 times that. It's a 168-bit key. And AES is 256-bit. You can also get it in 192 and 128. But for purposes of the exam, concentrate on DES should be a 64-bit key, but making it a 56-bit key. We've got triple DES, we've got AES. So these are small and fast. Now, what is bits? Here we go. I've got a 100-meter track. Over here, I've got Usain Bolt. And over here, I've got Arthur. Now, King Arthur is a 400-year dude. He's a 4096-bit key. Usain is a 56-bit key. So if you've got an old dude, a 400-year-old, he's got armor on, he's got a shield and a sword, and he's going to run 100 meters. And you've got Usain Bolt. Who's going to win the foot race? Who do you think? Who's the fastest? What do you think, Monica? Can you hear me? Can anyone hear me? Okay, so what happens is Usain Bolt, he will win the race. So what do we know here? We know the smaller is faster. We also know the larger the key, the slower, but more secure. So what is the exam going to ask you for things like symmetric encryption? It's never going to ask you which key encrypt and which key decrypt, because it's always going to be the same. So they're never going to say which key encrypts, which key decrypt. So let's look at what they're going to ask. Somebody's got hot mic, can you please turn it off? So if I look at symmetric encryption, so here we go. Here is symmetric encryption. Now let's look at this. Here's two trucks, the two 5-ton trucks. And over here, and over here, we've got 4 people. And these trucks are full of Skittles. So, this one here, the Skittles are actually single. And these guys have got sacks. They've also got spades. And they've got a shovel Skittles into the bag. These guys here have got motorized trolleys. But when they look inside the truck, Skittles are actually in boxes. So obviously, Skittles in boxes we can take into the warehouse much faster. So if you think of encryption, this is inside. But with symmetric encryption, it's block cipher because data is inside blocks. Now, what is the reason we're using symmetric encryption? The reason is to encrypt large amounts of data. So every time we're using symmetric encryption, we're encrypting large amounts of data. Now, where would I find this? If you look at an L2TP over IPsec VPN, you've got an authenticated header which is using SHA-1 and MD5. And those data integrity. And over here, the encapsulated and over here, we've got DES, triple DES, and AES. Now, because we're using symmetric encryption and it's weak on its own, when we set up a VPN, we're going to set up a kernel first, and then we're going to transfer the data. So let's now look at the one that's heavily tested, and it's known as asymmetric. And asymmetric encryption, we've got two keys. It's got a private key and it's got a public key. Now, every time you see this word here, public key infrastructure, PKI, always think asymmetric encryption. Now, if I've got a private key and I've got a public key, think of the private key in your bank card. Would you give somebody your bank card? No. For the private key, you're going to retain. And the public key is like a deposit slip. I would give 50 million deposit slips away. I want to put money in my bank account. And we give it a. So let's look at how this can work. In Linux, you talk about SSH key. So they're removing the password, and here is your remote server. So what we do in Linux is SSH -tgem -t RSA 1024-bit. That gives me a private key, and it also gives me a public key. Their strength is 1024-bit. Now, if we use the command SSH-copy ID, we're going to actually install a certificate over here. Now, this certificate are we going to install? We're always going to install the public key. So concept, every time we've got to copy a key and put it into a remote server, it's always going to be the public key. So let's see if we can decipher the differences between identifying a public key and a private key. Here we go. If I look first of all at the private key, and then I'll look at the public key. So this one here is going to be private, and this one here is going to, and they talk about the format of the key. Now the private key is more useful. If he was in the military, he would be a higher rank than the public key. So he's going to be a P12 format. The public key is going to be a P7B. But recently in the test, they're bringing up what is the PKCS. Now, PKCS is the same as format. So they've both got format of P12 or P7, or a PKCS of P12 or P7B. Now, the public key has got a .CER extension. The private key has got a .PFX extension. Now, let's go and have a look at when we're going to use these. So I'm going to come out of my whiteboard, and then I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to look here at what we're doing. Now, with encryption, stage one encryption is exchange keys. So, which keys do we exchange? We don't, our private key we never give away, so we always exchange the key. So let's look at a scenario. Over here is Bob. Bob says to Carol, "Hey Carol, I want to encrypt data to send it to you." So stage one, you can see that Bob has given his public key, as he's got the black key there, to Carol. And Carol has got the white key there, she's given Bob her public key. So I've got a thing we use called Southeast Distinguished Visitor. So he's going to encrypt. What's he going to do? He's going to encrypt with Carol's public key. Now the exam tests, which key do we use to encrypt data to send to somebody? We use the recipient's public key. And then what happens is when the data gets to Carol, she uses the private key. Then you go. It's a bit like Bob goes to the bank, it's $100 in with a deposit slip. And then 2 days later, Carol goes to the ATM, takes it out. So that is encryption. Encryption, we use the recipient's public key to encrypt. They use the corresponding private key to decrypt. Now, let's look at a digital signature. It says to Mary, he sends her an email. "Hey Mary, I love you." And she sends back, "Who's this?" He says, "George." She says, "George, I want to know it's you. I want you to digitally sign your email." Now, because there's only one private key and there's multiple public keys, he digitally signs the email with his private key. And she then, so S is for digital signature. He signs the key with his private key. She then validates it with the public key he sent. So she knows it's actually legitimate. Now, troubleshooting certificate is heavily tested. I think it's under implementation. What you've got in the certificate, you've got a thing called the trusted root. And you can see here, here's the trusted root, and here's the certificates. Now, these are all certificates from well-known vendors like Komodo, like DigiCert, things like that. So if you've got a machine, and let's say we've got a new certificate from a company called ABC, we can see that we've got a AAA certificate here, we've got no ABC. So if we try and use the ABC certificate, we'll get an error because it's not in the trusted root. So install it in the trusted root, and that means that your machine is going to trust certificate from that authority. The other thing about troubleshooting is certificate expired. Now, one of the reasons a certificate might be expired is the certificate chain. This is the trust all the way up to the vendor. Now, if the chains get less than 3 layers, you'll get a certificate error. The layers should be vendor, vendor CA, and actually computer. Now, here's the bit that's really helpful. When we are troubleshooting certificate exam question, if in the question that's got host error, if in the question that's got trust error, if in the question that's got an untrusted error, we're always looking for a certificate error. Has the certificate expired? That's very common. Is there a problem with the chain? Is it in the trusted root? However, if you get a certificate question in the exam, and it just says error, I've got an error, then it's a setup error. So for instance, is the S-MINE plugin been set up? I hope that helps you. Now, has anybody got any questions? No? So, here's other people I would recommend. By the way, this is an extract from the book. Chapter 2 has got far more information. If you've enjoyed it, it might be worth reading that and reading my book, actually. Now, other people to follow, Josh Mason, he does a lot of work and it's free, and he's live on YouTube, and he's helping people deal with cybercrime. So he's a good source of free information for cybercrime. Also, you've got on the cyber side, you've got Cyber Tech Dave, and he runs initiatives, and I think he's got a course that says 100 days, and I think he's in day 20 or something like that. He helped people get into cybersecurity. One of the people that's really up and coming is Kevin Capillararo. Right. So what Kevin's doing, he's putting a lot of free training on people that are trying to get into the industry. So he's got how do you set my resume up? How do you make an application? He's also got, as it says, interview prep, hands-on labs, resume prep, premium resources. And Kevin is doing a lot of this for free, but he's recently a couple of, but they're very small. He does a lot of free training, does a lot of live training. The other thing we've got here is a guy called Joe Botchin, and he's called ITSM Rhino Crash. and he has ITSM coffee. It says, let's meet at this date, have a coffee, and explain things doing with ITSM. So I hope that you've enjoyed the session we've done today, and I hope you'll come to my next session, which is in about 2 weeks' time.